Shadow Kings. I hold out. As so often happens when you just kind of riding long, but you're just kind of riding easy. Kind of realized I'd been going in my own little world there for a little bit with my spotlight consciousness. And I thought, oh, I better check, see what's going on. Kind of let out to that floodlight consciousness and felt around out in the shadow realm that we all in. And it seems to me like everybody's pretty much doing all right. Everybody just kind of in their own little world, mind their own little business as we go along. And it seems to me, I checked a group, and it's kind of like any big cookout or Thanksgiving dinner or thing that you've been to with a lot of people. Everybody gets their food and they get settled. There's a group that have settled where they're at, and they're just enjoying their meal. And when it's quiet, no news is good news, right? Everybody's just enjoying their food. So that's a good thing. And the rest of us kind of just continue to ride in our own little world. And so there's going to be these two groups, is what I'm understanding, okay? And the group that are sitting there enjoying their food, that may be where they sit. And maybe where they alight and settle, and that's where they stay. And power to you, Shadow Kings. Your work will continue from there. Fill your cups and do good work. And the rest of us are just going to keep riding on into the morning. So because it was quiet, I have a tendency to kind of worry about it at first, but I saw that it was okay. But I also got to thinking in that couple of moments where there was a slight panic, there might be something to that nothing. Okay? And that's what it is. Sometimes it's okay. But I also thought what I'm likely to do is go ahead and fill it up. That space. Because that's what I do. And that's kind of what we all do. So I thought I might tell you a little story about how this whole thing got started. And it started about a year ago when someone said something to me that cracked my whole entire world wide open. And nothing has been the same since. This is a thing that I'm still working on. It was like an explosion. And everything that I had thought previously to that has changed, and I'm going to look back one of these days and realize that was a really big pivot point in my life. Because it was and is, and it's something that I'm still continuing to compensate for. The absolute incredible thing that happened. Okay, I felt like I was tossed into the abyss. It's kind of what happened. And the reason that this is the story that's coming out now is because that was a year ago. Okay, and I haven't talked to that person one-on-one for over 9 months. And in that time, in that void, has all of this stuff come to bear on me. That is the work that I'm doing now, understand? It's overwhelming. It's hard to explain what it is that happened. So I'm not really going to try to. What I'm going to say is, after this 9 months has happened, a couple of nights ago, I had a dream, and I woke up again in the middle of the night, and this is happening a lot lately. And in this dream, I was aware of the fact that I was just kind of floating through the void of space. And my initial thought, as I kind of came around into some kind of consciousness, was, oh shit. Because, if you ever watch some of these movies, if you're floating in the void of space without a handhold, it's over for you, man. And that's kind of how it felt. And I felt an instant sense of panic and desperation because I was cut loose of anything that was civilized. So, you know, it wasn't a cold sweat, but it was close, okay? And the thing we have to remember to do when that happens is, and this is a thing that I preach, we have to be smarter than our physiology. I've got to be quicker than my brain. So I grabbed a hold of that real quick in the midst of my panic of this dream that I was having, and I realized, hey. We are floating through the void of space, unattached to anything that's civilized. However, Briar Fox, this is where we're from. This is the void. This is where we live and thrive, and this is where it all begins, and this is where I came from. You understand? I'm Briar Rabbit. And you can't scare me by throwing me into the briar patch that I was raised in. Okay? So this is the thought I'm having with myself sometime early in the morning, getting a hold of my brain so it doesn't scramble my eggs first thing, you know, okay? So that's how it is. That's what happened. And I'm watching this process happen to myself as I'm watching this process unfold, okay? And that's kind of the beginning of understanding of watching your consciousness work, and that's how Shadow Kings got started. All back because of a year ago and something somebody said. And Shadow Kings is today, in case that you're wondering, that name, Shadow Kings, actually came from a little riff that I had written for this person and never sent. And I was trying to express some of the esoteric concepts, some things. Anyway, I would kind of put them down in words, and that's where Shadow Kings came to be. So the fact that it has worked out the way that it has is kind of a sweet serendipity, to be honest with you. So here we are, Shadow Kings, and it's worked out well. And that's kind of the way that it works, right? Okay, now when I tell you that my world cracked wide open when this happened, is not to put too fine a point on it, and there is no exaggeration there. And I'm looking at the abyss, which is just another void, right? And this is the thing that I've been working to move my way through and navigate this space, which is uncharted territory, which only existed in a potential that I didn't realize before that happened. It existed, and I'm looking at the abyss. And I wasn't sure what to make about it. Okay, so that's when I started studying, and I started learning some things, and I started paying attention, and I had to, after this explosion of consciousness, I had to get back to my spotlight consciousness and look at myself, realize that I was okay. But at the same time, it was like having been in the dark for so long, and then somebody sets off an explosion, or a flash of light, or lightning happens. And it takes a while for your eyes to compensate to that again, see? The flash dazzles your eyes, and you have to readjust again to the darkness that you were in. You understand? So I lit my little flame, my little match, and I kept going. And all we can do is begin to navigate this space that's wide open. And there is no definitive path. You understand? Not in the void, there's not. So how do we do it? Okay? This is what I've becoming to learn. Now I'm going to liken it to the fact that just like if a tree root, okay, is growing through the concrete, there's a time when it reaches a strength, as delicate as it is in the beginning. It's just a fine hair, but it finds its way through a tiny crack or fissure, and then it builds its own strength right there. It continues to build its strength until it reaches a certain critical mass, literally, And though there was not necessarily a crack or any imperfection in the concrete at the time, it has its natural fissures. This little tiny hair-like root of the tree will eventually build its own strength and vitality and crack that concrete, which is brittle and not flexible. That's the difference. Okay? One has life in it and one does not. All right? So this is kind of the same thing that happened with a set form of consciousness that I had been existing in prior to that. My existence was like the concrete, and all of a sudden it's cracked wide open. Well, the interesting thing about that is, just like this new crack in the concrete, there's an open space there. Now, this tree root has done this in its own search for space. It has created a space. It followed an impulse through a small space, filled itself up to the point that it cracked the concrete and created a larger space for it to fill in, right? Follow me? The tree root, I can guarantee you, does not panic like I did when I found myself in this wide open, uncharted space that didn't exist until just now. Just like that crack in the concrete, the hour comes. You might even hear it. There's times when you can hear these cracks happen. A good example is glaciers. When they peel off an iceberg, there's a tremendous thunderous crack that happens. It wasn't a minute ago, and now it is. And a great resounding crack. The noise and the thing happen. And this is what happened. So now I have this space in front of me, and I'm not sure what to make about it. Everything that I thought about things, I was having to rethink. Okay? And when you spend as much time in the void as I have, and in the dark, you learn to be okay with it. That's a thing that I know. It all kind of becomes natural to us, and so I was able to continue forward. Interestingly, I think it's an Eastern term for Oriental East. The word is nadir, which actually doesn't mean below, like a lot of people think, being the opposite of zenith, which means above. But think about it more this way, in that it means beyond or through. Okay, nadir refers to the abyss, and it refers to below. And that's exactly the place that I'm talking about. So I got my little flame, and I'm continuing forward, and I'm considering the deep and wide, which seems unnavigable because there are no clear indications, there's no clear directions as to how that it is that we go. So how do we go? How do we go about it? And the thing that I'll give you a couple examples. There's a natural order of process in the sciences that follow laws of the known physical universe that we know about. One of them is called hydrophilic. Okay, there are certain forces that act on elements of our universe, and these are the laws that they follow. Hydrophilic force is one of the forces that binds our universe together and makes things work the way that they do, and that is one of the ways that cellular biology, as well as chemical biology, follows the natural processes to make things the way that they are, that are demonstrable, repeatable, enough that these are the basis for which we have things like trees and tree roots and concrete, which we have learned to master. Now, one of the ways that concrete works is that there are particular elements in it that form structure of crystals, and it's because of a hydrophilic process. So wherever there has been water, wherever there is water, in between all of these molecules, see, of the concrete, as the water leaves in kind of a capillary action, because it's going to eventually evaporate, see, it's not absorbed, it's evaporating. In a capillary action, it draws forth some of the components of the borate that are in the concrete. And as they're liquefied in a solution, as the water continues to leave, now that's an H3O83, something like this, borate. Okay, and you know water is H2O. See how that's hydrophilic? It has hydrogen in it as well. So I guess you could say it's hydrogen-philic, but for our purposes right now, it's attracted to the water and follows the path of that water through the molecular gaps. And as it does so, and the water leaves the borate, it forms a crystal inside of the concrete. You understand? And all of the power of all of those crystals inside of the concrete are what gives it its strength. Now, the slower that you let the concrete cure, like if you continue to keep it wet, which is what you want to do, you don't want it to dry too fast, see? It doesn't have time to cure then. So what you want to do is keep it wet and keep that water there, because as you do that, more and more strength, just like a tree root, critical mass is built into those crystals as they form. They have a longer period of time in which to do that, and that makes a much, much stronger cure on your concrete. Okay, you got that? Oh man. Okay, so that's the way that concrete, now you know a little bit about that. And we have an idea of how tree roots work. I'll take care of these guys. Okay. One of these days I'm going to be able to explain these concepts that I'm talking about in concert with whatever it is I got going on in the game. I'm looking forward to that day, but right now, this is just kind of how I have to do things using this format here. Okay. Yeah, that happens too. Okay. So, I think we've taken care of that business. Things happen to fill up the void occasionally. See, you run right into them. That's how I'll put that. And sometimes that's what happens. Kind of like a road sign coming up in the dark, and your headlights come up on it. You didn't see it until just then when you did see it. You understand? So these situations sometimes kind of play us as we move through the void, and we handle those situations as they come up. And that is what just happened there, and that is also what continues to happen as I was moving through all of this and understanding. So I know all of this science-y stuff, and so it kind of made sense to me to explain it that way, and biology stuff, because this is kind of the same way, if you think about it, if you're courageous, that you can navigate a void. And the way that you do that is with your deliberate intention, with the impulse and the thing that is a compulsion in you, the same way that the tree root finds its way through the minuscule and possibly only molecularly sized, quantum-sized spaces or gaps or voids in concrete. It interjects themselves in there, and you can say that that has some kind of, what it has is life and an impulse. And our consciousness is really no different. Okay? And if I can explain that as just down to literally a chemical process, and I'm not going to bore you with all of the details that I know about that, that's part of my research and understanding that I had to come to for my patent for the material that I invented, and then had to go and explain how that it is. Okay, so I know a thing or two about these things. But what I'm saying is, it can be a chemical process, and it can be as simple as the organic process of a tree root seeking its way through the path of least resistance every time, and following water, okay, because it's hydrophilic. It's attracted to that water because like attracts like. What did I just tell you about borate? It has hydrogen in it, so does the water. The material that I invented on the basis of I was using it on a very slippery plastic called tennite. And cellulose is like cellulose, so I understood that that is, hard as that is to do, to attach anything to a slick kind of plastic. That slick kind of plastic, if you know the secret, is made originally from wood. And that is how I was able to solve a very long, old-standing problem. New way was to understand that way that things actually work. So that's what I'm trying to get you to understand, is how that I believe at this time that these things work. And part of that is because I've examined the particular components and the facts that are behind them. So I can liken them to something that is a little more layman's term. So consciousness is one of those things that's very slippery also to try to explain or attach or understand anything to, and how that it is that we move through it, or how that it is that it moves through us, right? What I'm asking you to consider is, especially when we find ourselves in these places where we're traveling through a place with no clear-cut path, that there is a way that you can establish a vector through it. And a way that you would do that is a similar way to the way that a natural order process does happen in the natural world, a chemical process. And we call that curing of the concrete, when those little crystals are formed. Okay? And the tree root goes into its space and will split a boulder or concrete. It's a powerful, powerful mechanism. Okay? And what I'm saying is, your consciousness is not really so different. And your consciousness, as far as you're aware of it, is also based on some things like your human physiology. The electrolytes, literally the ions that are in your bars, and there are some of the similar ones. Boron, also boric acid, is a component. Magnesium, calcium, these things are, that's what's in the lime, that's in the concrete, that helps form the structures. Literally the calcium that's in them, that's what they make the structures out of. Those are components of your brain chemistry as well. You understand? Okay, so they have functional properties of a chemical transaction that happens. In the tree roots, same thing. Okay, there are just properties that are natural order of laws to do that. There's nothing mystical about any of this process that I'm telling you about. Okay, so why would we not understand that if it's just literally chemical and according to physical laws of our universe, and that they're organic, and it's an organic principle in that these tree roots will find life and find their way, why can we not extend that to say that is even an alchemical process, being a natural process, and next even being a spiritual process? That the same way our consciousness goes out and searches in these places in between the fissures and the cracks, and every so often occasion a very large void, just like that big crack that now is opened up in the concrete. That concrete's broken in half. That root can go any direction now, right? It doesn't panic because there's a big space. It's joyful in exploring that space. And our consciousness can go out from us the same way and explore the space that seems like a void and empty, that we have no idea which direction that it is we might go. And we call that our volition. Now, occasionally something will come along. Oh, and I got to throw in there at some point, there are things that are just unique. There are things that are called non-Newtonian. that just don't quite follow the rules, okay? And that's why I'm doing this. A thing happened to me that didn't seem to follow the rules that I knew before, okay? Those are the kinds of things that now we have to compensate. And you know, can anybody say hello Heisenberg? The uncertainty is part of the void. For those of you that know, Heisenberg uncertainty principle is based on, there are some things even in physics that they cannot quite explain how that they work. Quantum entanglement is another one. And you know, hello Schrodinger's cat. Is it or is it not alive? We don't really know for sure, and there's no way to tell for sure until we open the box and look. But it's not just Schrodinger's cat. See, even the quantum scientists have had to come to these kinds of esoteric examples to explain the things that they cannot even explain, that are still in the open void of their explanation. They cannot explain these things. That's why they call them, they don't know what name to give it. Non-Newtonian is the best word that they can say. It doesn't act according to Newtonian physics. But you know what? Neither does a regular cat. It's not just Schrodinger's cat that we don't know what's going to do next. Any cat. Okay? So what we need to be is okay with that. And we can operate in the dark and continue to move forward on these things with the confidence to know that we're backed up by the whole entire history of time, and how that it is that this planet and everything on it was developed. Okay? Because it all works according to these natural laws. So now, get excited about that. So if we're following our consciousness, and that's the thing that happened, like I said, this was a specific incident that happened, and a person said a thing, well, why would it not follow through that if there are components in the tree root and components in the concrete crystals, that a person might not be attached to this consciousness, which it is that I'm following? See what I mean? There might be a body attached to it. How do I know that it's not you? Because it might be that it is. Going forward, and this is where it seems like a profound reference, I literally breathe you in my dreams. It may be years before you come across this video. I don't know. But the thing of it is, in my time frame where I'm at, in my consciousness and my awareness of explaining these things, it seems critically important. The compulsion is there for me to overcome my misgivings or shortcomings or my fears or my insecurities about making these videos, and yet I continue to make them because I'm hot on the trail of something that I don't know what it is. But it is so compelling to me, I travel the path nonetheless. And that's how Shadow Kings got started. That was for me to watch myself transit this open space for the first time. I've done it before hundreds of times. I just never paid attention to how that I did it. And Shadow Kings will know you've been there too. And we're being called to examine and observe at the same time how that it is that we're navigating the space. Because as soon as we understand that we are and do, it becomes easier to take up your volition and make that deliberate. Understand? This is the important part of it. Part of the reason that I'm doing this is because I use the word compelled. That's not a mistake. I feel like I can't not do it. I feel like I am subject to it. Just like in that capillary action, the borate crystal is pulled forward because the water is backing out and leaving a space, a void. it can't not do it. That's the law. It's how it's going to work. And I feel the same way. As this consciousness moves away from me, I feel pulled forward, and I feel subject of it. At the same time, I realize that I am sovereignly the master of this void that I'm in. I have an awareness that that is what I'm doing, and I'm watching my consciousness fill in the space and move forward with the indications of where that it is that I might move next. And just like that sign coming up on the road. Okay, and occasionally we get a bone thrown to us, and that will maybe come in the form of those kinds of, they used to be called signs, and still somewhat is called signs, but they used to be called omens. If you look back through the Bible, they called them signs or omens. And if you look into Eastern traditions or heathen traditions, they're called omens. Here's a good classic one, portents. Okay, but they're also what Carl Jung in the 1920s or 30s, when he was trying to get a hold of his mysticism, he is the one that coined the term synchronicities, things that happen at the same time. As you happen to be thinking of this thing, something will come in your awareness, if you have your floodlight awareness out, that kind of rings through or reminds you of this thing that you just were thinking. Or two things coincide. See how we also call that a coincidence. And that seems like a sign that we're on the right track. Just like if I am looking for a sign that says Texarkana and one comes up, well, I won't be surprised because I knew it was coming up. But if I didn't know that it was coming up and it came up, I would say that's a synchronicity. That's serendipitous. I was looking for a sign that said Texarkana, and here one is. Because I was continuing to move forward, understand? And even when you're not, it'll bring it to you, I'll guarantee you that. Okay, so call it a synchronicity, call it a sign, call it an omen, call it a portent, whatever that is that you want. Occasionally in the void those things happen, and they come kind of from out of nowhere, and just in the same way that you cannot see light in space. That's why this blackness of void of space is black. Until there is something to shine light on, like a planet or a rock, whatever it is, or an astronaut's glove. There's a couple of them up there. Until that reflects the sunlight that's there on it, you cannot see that light at all. It's completely invisible to our human eyes. So there isn't a void. It is completely full. It's not empty, you understand? But the thing that is there potentiates it, whether it's a wrench or Jupiter. You understand? And then it is made aware, obvious to us in our consciousness. But that thing, that light already existed. It was already there, you just couldn't see it until it was potentiated by a thing that you would recognize. You understand? Okay, so that's how that it is that we go along, and we may choose a specific direction in the vector when that happens. Other than that, we just continue to go along until something does, or we continue to use our volition. And here's where it really starts getting good. When you can deliberately and with intention decide out of your intellect, and out of it is that your heart desires, those kinds of things that you will consider in your mind while you are traveling the void. And as you do that, you generate a potential for that thing to be. And there is a cardinal law that says any of those potentials have the potential to exist. That's just a fact. There is no crack in any concrete anywhere on this planet that did not already have, for whatever reason. Sometimes it's not good, okay? Because if it's in a bridge abutment, it's not a good thing. But that crack always had the potential to be there, or it wouldn't be there. And if it is there, then there it is. There's no two ways about any of this. Understand? That thing is going to be there if the conditions are right. And what I'm telling you is, anything that you see in your potential that you deliberately intend, portent yourself, create from your volition, based out of your desires, is going to be a thing that is potentiated. From that point on, all you have to do is continue to follow the signature that you have made, the consciousness that is already laid bare, like following a scent. You can't see that either, and we can't follow a scent, but a dog can. Okay, it's a different form of sense. But that sense exists just as easily and just as simply as it is that a dog can follow a scent that you cannot see, but it can. It's second nature. It's very easy. Okay, so one of the things we can do is equip these senses, understand that they are, and then we can begin to develop them. Some animals have more highly developed senses. This is a sense that humans have, but it helps a little bit if you practice it. Just like any other sense that you have. If you practice listening, John James Audubon himself, that's what they said when they tested him, I think at Stanford, anyway, they tested his hearing. Now, John James Audubon is a very famous birder and painter of birds. And to this day, we have beautiful full-color plates of all of the birds that he painted and studied. But he specifically trained himself to look and listen for birds. And that's what they said. He has the most acute hearing of any human being we have ever tested. Now he's a painter. He's an artist. Why would he have this exquisite hearing? Well, because he was looking for certain birds, and he trained his sense from a common sense to an extraordinary sense. So much so the fact that he's number one in the world in hearing, according to this university that tested him. And I was fascinated with that process, because that senses are a thing that you can develop, understand? And that's just exactly how John James Audubon did that. And this is how we're going to develop these senses as well, as understanding first that they serve us, and second that there is some advantage to be having them. Extraordinary. And the extraordinary capacity that we are still unfolding is our ability to navigate this space and understand our place in the universe and be more productive in it, be more engaging in it, be more responsive to it, and find our way in it. We curate the direction with our intent. So it's important to continue to understand that how it is and what it is that you think is what matters, because it is going to navigate you in a certain direction, whether you are conscious of it or not. Your ego can go along for the ride or not. You can be aware of it or not. It's going to happen to you. But you can become deliberately and soundly aware of it. Then you have a tool and you can begin to utilize it. It's just that simple. Just take it up. And it's going to work. Just the same way it's based on a natural law. You're going to build a critical mass, and as you do, like I was at a comfort zone, and the power with which that you intend is going to crack things open in your life, and you're going to make the space grow yourself into as you move forward. And we can look at that like a road, or we can look at that like going into a crack in the concrete, any of those things, but the space has to be opened up first. Here's another easy example, guys. Here's how a transmission works. If you're going along in gear, we're just started to be right there. We're going along in first gear. What is the thing that needs to happen before you can shift to any other gear? You have to push the clutch in. The thing that it is that some people don't understand is the thing that the clutch does when you push it in is actually what it undoes. It unlinks, it unhinges all of the shit that's in the transmission. It lets loose all of those gears, you understand? That's the void that is required so that we can shift into that next gear. So it is said that nature abhors a vacuum. I will say that the opposite is true. I think nature loves a vacuum and a void, because those are the places where things happen. So if you find yourself floating through space, realize you're going to be okay. You're just in a clutch moment. All right? Find the gear that you want. Look for the size of teeth. Look for the desire of your heart in that moment. Don't panic. You're content to just roll along. Just see what comes up in your consciousness next. What impulse is given to you? And follow that, you understand? So where are we going from here? We are engaging all of this volition and all of these things. Mostly to understand that it is for you and up to you to match forces with these things, to apply yourself in a knowing and deliberate manner to where you don't feel only subject to. You feel like you are a part of, and you begin to feel your mastery. Your mastery will build into something called sovereignty over your life. I think you can understand how valuable and important that might be. And the time will come when it is that whatever it is that you've learned on your path, you build a wealth of, and you build a critical mass of, and your cup runneth over with, that you may begin to share it, and you make your contribution back, even if it is only the void that you understand and can appreciate. So where are we going? What is the point of all of this? It is just to continue. It is just to explore, and we're always on our way home. All paths lead to home. The thing is set. That's the direction that it's going to go. You can go willingly, or you can go unwillingly, but you're on your way. And what I'm saying is, your whole life is a lot different when you feel like you're a willing companion and a willing participant in this process. And that's what I'm here to tell you. It can be done, and it is just as simple as the chemical processes that make concrete cure, or as the simple hair-like delicate root that breaks a concrete sidewalk in time. Just that powerful as well. Power to you, Shadow Kings.